Samach Gimel Amid Aleph will begin Daf Samach Beis Amid Beis, 4 lines from the bottom at the end of the line. We learned previously the Bryce that said there was 2 Seirim of Yom Kippur that if you shechted b'chutz, so there's an Isser of Shchutei Chutz, Ve'al Pesach Ol Moed Eloi Heviu, something that you're supposed to bring and shechted be makrivit in the oil moed in the Beis Hamikdash. If you do it Shchutei Chutz, he's chayiv kares. If he does it amazing, he's chayiv kares. So the Shnei Siri Yom Kippur, if he shechted it b'chutz, if it's before the Hagrola, he's chayiv on both of them. But after the Hagrola, he's chayiv on the Shashem, because that's the one that you were supposed to bring and be makrivit Pesach Ol Moed, but Patra on Azazel. So the Gemara asked that if it's actually Higral, why should be chayiv on both of them? What's it fit for? You can't be makrivit for the Shem, you can't be makrivit before the Hagrola. The Rav Chisda said, Hoyel v'royel asar nasa b'chutz. It could be used for the Musafim, for the Sar Anasa. So he holds of Hoyel. Even though these were originally designated for the Sar Anasa B'fnim and the Zazel, but it could have been used for the Musaf, and therefore he's chayiv for Shchutei Chutz. Why do we say that it's only for the Musaf? And why don't we say that Hoyel, it could be used, if you make a Goyal, one of them could be used for the Sor Nasa B'fnim? So the more answers, because Mechusar HaGrola is considered a Mechusar Maisa. So it's a Mechusar Maisa, and a Mechusar Maisa, therefore, you don't say on such a thing, it's not considered fit. You don't say Hoyel if you're missing an action. You're Mechusar Maisa. So, Amar Ravina, Zog the Gemara Amar Ravina, Hofstedter, Amar Chisda Mechusar HaGrola Ki Mechusar Maisa Dami, he says that the missing the Hagrol, you haven't yet made the girl. You're missing an action, it's Mechusar Maisa, and therefore you don't say that you're chayiv on that for Shchutei Chutz. He said the following halach: Shlamim sheshachtim kainim sheniftachu dal satzayhechal psulim. The korban is only kosher when the doors of the heichal are open. If you shech the korban shlamim before they open the doors of the heichal, that korban is possible. Shenemar ashchata pesach ol moed. It has to be Pesach Ol Moed, so the doors have to be open. The doors of the Heichal have to be open. So if you shech them when they were closed, it's not Pesach Ol Moed, that's possible. Well, if that's the case, when we say that Ishchata Pesach Oil Bizman Shu Pasuach, V'loi Bizman Shu, no, it has to be when it's open and not when it's locked. So if that's the case, Shachtam B'chutz, if you did Shchutei Chutz, Kaim Sheniftachu Dal Saheichal, before they open the doors, you're potter. Then you'd be potter. My time, Mechusar Psicha, Mechusar Maisa Dami. The Mechusar opening the doors is missing an action, meaning in the current state, it's not something that you should bring El Pesach Oil Moed. It's not kosher b'fnim. It's not kosher b'fnim, so therefore you should not be chayiv for Shchutei Chutz. You theoretically could open the doors, but that's the Mechusar Maisa. That Mechusar Psicha is Mechusar Maisa, and therefore you don't say that it could have been brought bifnim. You're missing an action over here. You're missing a fundamental component. So in its current state, it's not something that should be brought bifnim. It's not something that you say you would apply El Pesach Ol Moed Lo Yeviu, because it's not something that you could be makriv in the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore there's no chiyuv of Shchutei Chutz. But we're saying that Rav Chisda said that you chayiv for this Seirim before the Hagrola, since Hoyel, that it's roy lesoyer hanasa b'chutz, it could have been used for the korban musaf. Does Rav Chisda hold of Hoyel? Since I've Rav Chisda, he says Pesach sheshachta b'chutz b'shari meisashana. If you have a Pesach that you shechted outside the Beis Hamikdash the rest of the year, not on the 14th day of Nisan. So, for instance, if you had, as Amir explains, for instance, if you had a lamb that was designated for the Korban Pesach, it became lost. You were makriv something else, a replacement one for the Korban Pesach, and then you found this. Afterwards, you found this, the original one. So now you have this, which was originally designated for the Korban Pesach, but it's after Pesach. So this cannot be brought for a Korban Pesach. But it could be brought for a Korban Shlomim. A Pesach b'Yomi Masechet could be brought as a Korban Shlomim. So, therefore, Lishma, if you shechted it, the person shechted it for the shame for the Korban Pesach, he did it bachutz, he did it outside the Hazara, he's pot. Because you cannot bring this for a Korban Pesach b'fnim. So we don't apply Al Pesach Al Moed Lo Yavil. But Shaloi Lishma, Vishachted Shaloi Lishma, which is a valid Korban, a Korban Pesach, that is shechted not for a Korban Pesach. He shechted for a Shlomim, it's kosher for a Shlomim. So it should be brought, could be brought b'fnim. So therefore you would apply Al Pesach Al Moed Lo Yavil, and therefore he's chayav for shchutei chutz. So time at the Shaloi Lishma. Now, why do we say he's chayav? Because he shechted Shaloi Lishma. Stama, but if he didn't do it specifically Shaloi Lishma, he did it without any intent, then we would say Lishmoi hu upater. We would consider it Lishmoi for the Korban Pesach, and it'd be pater. It'd be pater because he's not chayav shchutei chutz, because you can't bring it b'fnim. V'mai, why should we say that? Why don't we say Lema Hoyel? Why don't we say Hoyel? Lema Hoyel v'roi Shaloi Lishma b'fnim. Why don't we say that it's Hoyel, since he could bring it and be mocked of it, Shaloi Lishma, he could have an intent for a Shlomim, and it would be kosher b'fnim, so he should be chayav for chutz. If Rav Chisda holds of Hoyel, why don't we say such a case as well? Even if it's stoma, even if he didn't have the intent Shaloi Lishma for a Shlomim, but he could have. And Hoyel, he could have had an intent for a Shlomim, it would be kosher b'fnim, he should be chayav b'chutz. The Gemara says, how can you compare? Hasam by Akira. There in the Korban Pesach, theoretically, it could be brought for a Shlomim, but it needs an Akira. In its current status, it's still a Korban Pesach. So in its current status, it cannot be brought b'fnim. You have to redesignate it, be oiker, and uproot it from a Pesach and turn it into a Shlomim. But in its current state, it's not valid b'fnim. Hi, loy boy Akira. But this case over here on the Seirim of Yom Kippur, it doesn't need an Akira. Now, even though the two Seirim originally designated for the Asar, they were designated to be used to make a girl for the Sor Hashem and the Sor Lazazel, but nevertheless, the Sor Hashem is a Chatas. And these are designated originally as Korban Chatos. They were designated to be a Korban Chatas. And the Musaf is a Korban Chatas. So it's not redesignating it, it's not uprooting it from a different korban to become a chatas. It was originally designated to be a chatas. So therefore, you're going to apply Hoyel. But over here, even though you can turn the Pesach into a Shlomim, but you have to uproot it. You have to redesignate it. In its current status, it's not roy to be brought b'fnim. And therefore, we won't say Hoyel. And therefore, we say, B'stama your potter. So, Achash, Hasan by Akira. Hi, loy boy Akira. Rambam bar Shemi Masanle, but the Rabba, he learns in the same discussion, but not with the contradiction in Rav Chisda. He learns in the name of Rabba, Vikashlei the Rabba. He had a contradiction between one statement of Rabba and another, and Meshane Kedushanina, and he resolved it the way we just explained. Ki asa Rav Dimi Omar Rabbi Yirmiyah Omar Rav Yochanan. He said that Rav Yirmiyah said in the name of Rav Yochanan, so when he came to Babel from Eretz Yisrael, he said the following. He reported the following. Pesach sheshalta b'chutz b'shari Yomei Shana. If you have the Korban Pesach, you shechted it outside the base of Mikdash b'shari Yomei Shana after Pesach. Ben l'shma, ben shaloi l'shma pater. His version, the way he said it, in the name of Rav Yochanan, was whether it's l'shma or shaloi l'shma, you're pater. You're pater on shchutei chutz. So Amar Rav Dimi, Amris l'shma, coming to Rav Yirmiyah, I said it over in front of Rav Yirmiyah. And Bishlam, so he said Bishlam l'shma, we say that if it's l'shma, that it's pater, because a Korban Pesach, Shari Yomei Shana, can't be marked with as a Korban Pesach. So it's not roi b'fnim. So I understand your pater and shchutei chutz, it's not fit b'fnim. However, ela shaloi lishma amai. Why should you say v'shechted it shaloi lishma? He shechted it for a shlomim, and it's roy for a shlomim. So ha'chaze shaloi lishma b'fneim. It's roy b'fneim. So why is the chayiv for shchutei chutz? It's something that should have been brought b'fneim to the base of mikdash. V'amrli, and Rav Yomi answered, Akira's chutz lav shmei Akira. Redesignating it outside the base of mikdash is not called an akira. Now, he also holds that the Pesach is its status. It theoretically Pesach b'shar Yomi Masechet could be a shlomim, but its current status without uprooting is still a Korban Pesach. It has to be uprooted. So he agrees with that. However, he holds that uprooting outside the base of mikdash is not valid. So therefore, it still retains its status as a Pesach, which is not Roy B'fnim, and therefore it's Potter and Shchutei Chutz. Ki also Ravin, so there's a different version that he has of Rav Yirmiyah. Ki also Ravin, Amar Rav Yirmiyah, Amar Rav Yochanan. He said Rav Yirmiyah said in the name of Rav Yochanan, Pesach Shvat B'chutz, B'shar Yimei Zashana, Bein Lishmoi, Bein Shaloi Lishmoi Chayav. He says he's chayav, whether it's lishma or shaloi lishma. He's chayav in both cases. In both cases, he's chayav. So, afilu lishma, he's chayav lishma. How can it be that he's chayav even lishma? Why would you say that he's chayav even lishma? Now, chayav lishma is clearly not roy al pesach oil moed. You can't bring a korban pesach to the oil moed. It's not pesach b'shar yimei shana. It's not valid. So why should you say he is chayiv for such a thing? So apparently, as the Teitz Vishanim explains, what he's holding is that even though right now it's lishma for Korban Pesach and it's not valid b'fneim, but hoyel, he takes the principle of hoyel even a step further than we did before. He says hoyel that you could have redesignated it for a shlomim, and hoyel that you could have brought it inside, so it's a further extent of hoyel. Hoyel that you could have redesignated it, and hoyel that you could have brought it inside. Therefore, we say that hoyel that you could have done it shaloi lishma. You could have redesignated, and you could have done it shaloi lishma, and you could have brought it inside. You're chayav. So, but do we in fact go this far to say that? Do we say that you say even a lishma he should be chayav for this? Va'afil lishma. V'atan we learn in the Mishnah. So we learn in the Mishnah of Zvach mechusar zman. If an animal is a korban, it's mechusar zman. It's premature. Bein begufa, whether it's begufa. For instance, the animal is not yet 8 days old, so you can't bring the korban at this time. It's too early. It's mechusar zman begufa. Bein bebalim, or whether the owner is not fit at this point to bring makriv the korban. Ve'ezo mechusar zman bebalim. What's an example of mechusar zman bebalim? For instance, azav, vayoledes. Now they have to bring korbanos. Zav vayoledes, azav vayoledes and mitzer. Shehigiv chatos v'shamam bechuz. They were makriv, the korban chatas v'asham, that they're mechuyev to bring for their tara. They did it b'chutz. They did it outside the Beis Hamikdash, but before they're eligible to do it, before they completed their yemei tara, before they completed either the 7-day period or the 40-day period, they brought it too early. So it was too early rather, and they shechted it b'chutz. So in these cases, the kriva chatos and sham b'chutz, they're potter, because it's a mechusar zman, and therefore it's not roy lepasach ol moed. So they're potter for shchutei chutz. But oile seim v'shalmeim b'chutz, if they're oile and the shlomim, that's on b'chutz, meaning it's not the korban that their tahara is dependent on. Now these could have been brought as nadavas. So these animals, even though it's for their tahara, but they could be brought as an adavas, then they're chayavim. Then they're chayav for that for shchutei chutz, because it could have been brought bifnim. Ve'omer Rav Chilki bar Tuvia, and he said, however, lo yishanu. Where did we say this? That the asham, that he's potter on the asham, lo yishanu el lishma. That's when it was shech el lishma. So since it's mechus zman, it's not roy b'fnim, and it's potter b'chutz. Aval shaloi lishma. But if he shechted the asham shaloi lishma, if he shechted for an oil or for a shlomim, chayiv, then he's chayiv. He's chayiv in such a case because it is fit for Pesach oil moed, and he's chayiv for chutz. So therefore, lishma miyupoter. We say that it was done lishma. However, in any event, we see as potter. Amai. Now, according to the way you're learning hoyel, why should it be potter? Name a hoyel v'roim shaloi lishma bifnim. Why don't you say hoyel that it could have been brought, even though it's an asham right now, but he could have brought it shaloi lishma. He could have, if he shechted it for shaloi lishma, let's say for an oilam, the korban is kosher. It's all Obama Shem Chayva, but it's kosher. So he could have shechted it shaloi lishma. He could have brought it bifnim. So why don't we say hoyel in such a case, and therefore he should be chayiv shkutei chutz? Why says hachi ash? What's the comparison? Hasam by akira. There you have to uproot it. You have to uproot it from an asham to an oil to make it roy b'fnim. But hacha, the reason he said by Pesach, that if he did it lishma, that he's chayav, because hacha Pesach b'shar Yomi Masechet shlomim ninu. He says no. He argues on what was said previously. He says the status of a Pesach b'shar Yomi Masechet is a shlomim. So it doesn't have to be uprooted. It is a shlomim. And therefore, you're chayiv for chutz, because it has a status of a shlomim that you shechted b'chutz. Rav Ashi masne chayiv k'ramrinan. So Rav Ashi taught, and Rabban said that he's chayiv if he shechs the korban pesach, if he shechs it lishma b'chutz, like we just said before. That's how he reported it. But Rav Yirmiyah medifte masne potter. He says no, that he learns that you're potter. Kasavar Pesach b'shar Yomi Masechet by Akira. He learns that the Pesach b'shar Yomi Masechet, it has not changed its status. It could become a shlomim, but it still retains its status of the Pesach. So you need Akira. Akira's chutz lashmei Akira. And Akira chutz is not an Akira. Pligid Rav Chilki bar Tuvia, and it argues on Rav Chilki bar Tuvia. Who says that an Akira b'chutz is valid. Because Rav Chilki said from his statement that if you shech the Hashem shaloi lishma, he says you're chayiv because it could be brought as a shlomim. So therefore, he's saying that you shechted it outside the base of Mikdash, and therefore you're being oikred from an Hashem by doing a shaloi lishma. So as Rabbeinu Chananel explains, therefore obviously he holds that Akira b'chutz shmei Akira. Therefore we must say pligid Rav Chilki bar Tuvia. Rav Chilki bar Tuvia says that Akira is chutz shmei Akira. However, he holds that Rav Ashi holds that in his version that no, an Akira b'chutz is lo shmei Akira, and since Pesach b'shar Yomi Masechet needs an Akira to turn it into a shlomim, therefore he's potter because Akira is chutz lo shmei Akira.